What lessons can we learn from the Ravi Zacharias scandal? Let's talk about that on this week's episode.
J. Warner Wallace is a cold case homicide detective who's been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Dateline, and Court TV. Now, we join him as he applies his investigative skills to making a case for Christianity.
Welcome to the Cold-Case Christianity Broadcast. I'm Jimmy Wallace.
And I'm J. Warner Wallace.
And let's get right to the point. What are we talking about in today's episode?
Well, look, it's been well over a year since the investigation was completed related to Ravi Zacharias, let alone the first allegations. And I have not said anything about it publicly, but today what we want to do is give you some simple takeaways to protect yourself, not only if you're a public speaker or a public Christian, but even if you're just a regular person who doesn't even think they're ever going to be on YouTube, there are still some challenges, and we want to address those today. Now, before we start, go ahead, Jimmy.
No, I was just going to say, I'm sure that there's some people out there who, even though Ravi Zacharias was such a big name and he had such a wide reach, I'm sure there's some people who may not even know who he was or certainly weren't familiar with this scandal. Can you kind of give us a little background into what happened?
Yeah, you're right. I should have thought about that because that's true. I mean, not everyone has the familiar. We're apologetics geeks, right? We either are reading apologetics or writing about something in Christian apologetics. But Ravi, for a number of years, was the guy to go to. He was the one that everyone knew internationally who was defending Christianity from all kinds of stages. Kind of came up to a system where he was either part evangelist, part defender of the faith. Born in India. I'm not sure if he was born in India, but of Indian descent. His parents certainly were, and so I think he was born in India. So he's well known. Pictures of Ravi pretty much were probably the one most recognizable Christian apologist on any stage was probably Ravi Zacharias. I did events with him as well, where I was on the stage with him in Q&As and speaking on the same stage as Ravi. So what happened was a number of years ago, a couple of allegations were being made. Allegations involving sexting, for example, with a woman who is in Canada, and then even the further allegations once he died that he was actually involved in sexual relationships with massage technicians at a business that he owned in Atlanta and abroad, and so all kinds of sexual allegations were made against Ravi. And it's easy I'm not going to go through the entire litany of accusations. Those are clearly publicly available. And as is a lot of the text of the investigation is now publicly available because RZIM, his ministry, actually hired a firm to do an investigation, and the firm came back and it was probably much worse than anybody thought it was ever going to be. And so this man who had impeccable reputation prior to the first allegation of the sexting scandal several years ago, ends up being remembered for all of this, and his legacy has been completely destroyed. As a matter of fact, I've been contacted by a number of people who have books in which Ravi had written the foreword or had written some part of the introduction or an endorsement, and all of those had to be stripped out of the books. I don't think anyone is publishing a Ravi Zacharias book or even a book in which Ravi has a small contribution or wrote a foreword. I've been asked to write forewords for some of those books to replace Ravi's. So I think in the end, none of us wants to find ourselves at the end of a long ministry effort remembered this way. And there were some things that happened along the way that I think are cautionary tales for all of us, not just people who are public stage taking, defenders of the faith or evangelists. But if you're listening to this and you just are somebody who considers yourself interested in Christianity, well, there's even some takeaways for you, even if you're not a Christian, from what happened to Ravi. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, we've been reading articles about this. Is there an article that's out there, Jimmy, that you read recently that kind of describes some of this?
Yeah, I recently read one, kind of looking back on 1 year later from somebody who they themselves were involved, had met Ravi Zacharias. They had been involved in, I think they went to some schooling that he put on. They themselves had been a sex abuse survivor, so this was a very personal story. And I think one of the hardest things with Ravi Zacharias is he was if you saw him speak, he was a pretty charismatic speaker, very easy to like this guy who's speaking. And then on top of that, not only is he has a certain personality, but he's making great arguments, arguments that we ourselves would make for Christianity, defending Christianity. And so it's easy to see why he ends up being such a hero to so many people. And a lot of Christians can point to something that either Ravi Zacharias did, they saw him speak, or something that they experienced through one of his many ministries that impacted them. People would probably give him credit for them coming to faith, for them getting through a period of doubt. And so this becomes very personal. Not only is this a guy that people really liked, they felt they knew him, but that they felt he had a personal impact on their walk with God. And for them to see him now go from hero to being accused of being a villain is so difficult to accept and to grapple with, and it was a huge fallout.
Well, look, Elisa Childers, we've mentioned her a couple times on our podcast. She wrote a book, and in the first part of the book, she credits Ravi with part of her kind of awakening to Christian apologetics and to being able to defend and it actually had a huge impact on how I think she's where she is today, largely because this first domino was a Ravi Zacharias domino, and she's talked about it on her podcast, how it impacted her, and this idea that we somehow have to jettison. But look, this is how the world sees it. You make a case for something, and then you fall. They think, well, your case is junk. And I think in some ways, it was even more critical with Ravi, right? Because Ravi was not coming at it from a scientific perspective, where he is like, a Hugh Ross who's going to give you scientific reasons, some say from the fine-tuning of the universe. And so because of his stature as an astrophysicist, you go, wow, this is somebody, that seems reliable and credible to me. He seems to have trusted authority in that area. Or he also wasn't somebody like William Lane Craig, who was a philosopher who spent years and years kind of constructing and thinking about and debating about the Kalam cosmological argument, let's say. So when he speaks it, he's really kind of looked at every nook and cranny of the argument. So you think, wow, what a great philosopher. No, Ravi actually took the stage and waxed kind of rhapsodic. He was poetic. His speeches were often like poetry. He would quote some of the most sublime and gifted authors. He knew poetry. He could recite the poet. In other words, there was something about his character on the stage that was compelling. It wasn't so much if you took his words and typed them out, you wouldn't be as impressed as you would by listening to him deliver those words. There was a certain sweetness and kindness in the way he delivered the words, and that's why I think a fall like Ravi's is actually worse than a fall of somebody who's not standing on character to deliver a message, but is standing on knowledge to deliver a message, right? I can say, well, look, I love the information. People loved Ravi. And that's why I think the fall has been even more critical. Now, I don't know, you're a completely different generation, so tell me if Ravi had that if that's the way you saw him as well.
You know what? I was probably exposed to Ravi before his death, but I honestly don't have a specific memory of him until after he had passed away. So for me, this didn't really hit me as personally. This was not, one of when I thought of Christians who had an impact in my life, he just was not among the ones that I, immediately thought of. But I think I can see why somebody would struggle with this, because I've seen this even in my own life. One of the hardest things to do is to see one of the good guys, the people that are on your team, fail at something. You assume there's these people out there, they're the bad guys, and maybe they're going to do something bad, but that's because they're bad guys. But your team, your family, or your friends, those are the good guys. And so for me at least, it's always hit me more personal when it's somebody who I know and I love, and I see them fail in any way, whether it's just professionally, whether they go through a hard time in their relationship or marriage or whatever it is. To see somebody you know and love fail is so much more difficult than if a stranger does. And I think a lot of people felt close to Ravi, like they had this close personal relationship, even if they never spoke to him face to face. But that makes it that much more difficult. And I think some people even had a hard time accepting, when they first heard that allegation against Ravi, accepting that they could even be true, because this is somebody that we love, and it gets difficult. Can we love someone that is such a heinous sinner, or who's done something so horrendous? And if we
Yeah.
do love them, what does it say about us? I mean, it opens up a whole can of worms.
Yeah, I think there's two things you said that are really powerful there that I want to just unpack a little bit. And the first one is that as I look at us right now on the screen, I can see there's a generational difference, right? And you'll see that Ravi looks a lot more like me at his passing than he looked like you. And I wouldn't be surprised then if he's had even more impact. But here's what's great about Ravi: he had this almost fatherly kind of presentation, and he would always frequent university campuses, and people would show up like in the thousands, right? I mean, he'd fill these arenas, he'd fill them. And so he had a paternal view. He was able to reach different generations. But I just want to encourage people who are, look, there's a time and there are people that you're supposed to reach, that God has shaped you to reach. Ravi had a certain delivery and a certain appearance, and he was able to bridge certain generational divides because of that. But if you think, well, I'm too old to do this, or I'm too young to do this, you're wrong. The reality of it is that we are inclined to put our trust in people who are somehow similar to us, we can resonate with in some way, or we feel like, hey, I have a paternal relationship with. You're never too old, never too young. So that's the first thing. Ravi could bridge that gap. But the second thing you said, I think it was really interesting about how much more difficult it is when you are when your ministry is based, or your delivery is based so much on personality, right, rather than authority based on knowledge. It's harder, right? Like the fall is, it's one thing to say, well, if you found out, for example, some scientist who makes the case for Christianity on the basis of science it has a fall like this, I don't think you would reject the science that he offered all along, because you'd recognize that was not, his authority was not based on his personality and how winsome he was. His authority was based on whether he had accurately given you the information from science. So it seems to me that when we are really, and this is the culture we're in, like everything's moving toward visual media. We're doing this video in addition to a podcast from the same effort. Well, that means that this is a cult of personality at every level. And that's where I think we got to be careful, right? Is that the personalities are, I mean, look, the people know you and feel like they know you based on seeing you all the time, even if they don't really know you.
It's so difficult because I think that we want to develop relationships with people around us. We want to have that relationship with someone. And if someone has impacted us in any way, small or big, we want to feel close to that person. I think there's just something about humanity that we want these relationships. And I don't know if there's any way to fully remove yourself. We see this even with Paul in the New Testament. He's writing to these Christians saying, hey, don't be starting to align yourself, oh, you got baptized by me, or you came to faith under me, and now there's the Paul group versus the Peter group versus the whatever. But I think that we see this immediately after Jesus' death. There's already people trying to align themselves, and I don't know if we could ever fully get away from it, but it definitely makes it more difficult then when we see somebody have these personal failings, because now that calls into question a lot of the way that we felt about them and a lot of things that they said, and everything that Ravi Zacharias ever said may still be true.
Right. But now people will say, I'm going to toss that under the bus along with Ravi. Look, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about really why I think this happened and what we can do to protect ourselves from it happening to us.
Jay Warner and Susie Wallace have written 3 kids' books to help children know the truth and defend it in the public square. All 3 books mirror Jay Warner's adult books, chapter by chapter. And best yet, the kids' books are written as fictional stories that will turn your kids into detectives as they solve mysteries and learn about Christianity. There's also an interactive academy website at casemakersacademy.com where your kids can join other cadets and complete their own academy notebook. Each course has free videos, activity sheets, and more. Your young readers can even earn their own Junior Detective graduation certificates and appear on the Honor Cadet Wall. Be sure to visit casemakersacademy.com to learn more.
Be sure to visit the Cold-Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold-Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case note email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. Connect with Cold Case Christianity on social media. Visit the Cold Case Christianity homepage and click the social media icons on the top right toolbar. Jim is active on Facebook and Twitter, posting the best apologetics articles from over 250 Christian blogs around the country. You'll also find links to Jim's Instagram, Pinterest, and Google Plus accounts, along with the link to the Cold Case Christianity YouTube page. Stay connected with Cold Case Christianity and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, so in this half of our podcast, we're going to do our best as we videotape this also, as video record this also for YouTube, that, you know, and for NRBtv. We're trying our best not to have our pets jump up in our laps as we're doing this. And sure enough, you've got your cat trying to do that with you. So let's see if we can get through the next few minutes without interference from Catalina.
Yeah, we'll do our best. I think you might have caught a little bit of her tail in the first half, but so we're doing okay so far. So we'll see.
Okay, good. So now, look, we talk about this all the time, and unfortunately, you were raised with a homicide detective. And we talk about what it is that motivates people to do a crime. And so you know what I've been saying since I wrote Cold Case Christianity. I discovered this working homicides. There's only 3 reasons why anyone commits a murder. And what are those 3 reasons?
Well, I should know them with you as my father. The first would be power, some type of power in your job, political power, some type of influence. The second would be sex or some type of relationship that you want. And then the third would be money or greed.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I think that's this kind of what, and if you think about it, even all of the times that you and I can go back and say, I wish I hadn't done that. Whatever that is that we wish we hadn't done, it's also driven by one of those 3 things. And so it's not just that it's murders, it's that any sin, any misbehavior that anyone commits is based on those 3. And so if someone says, well, yeah, but what about jealousy? What about vengeance? What about, okay, what's driving the jealousy? What's driving the vengeance? It's going to be one of those 3. We have to go back to root causes. And one last thing I'll say about that is that people will say, well, what if someone's just not sane? They're not mentally well. Well, if you're criminally insane, I cannot prosecute you. By the way, that's a very, very, very small group. But I'm talking about those motives that are not, that would actually make it possible for me to prosecute a case. Those are going to be sex, money, and power. Now, the reason why I bring this up, Jimmy, is because it seems to me that that's what we're seeing with Ravi, right? And I learned this a long time ago. If you are, you have to guard yourself from all 3 of these. And you might think, well, in my life, I only have a problem with one of those. Or I don't really, you'll pick one over the other 2. And you'll say, if I just guard myself from that one, I'm good. No, it turns out if you scratch one itch, you end up scratching all 3 itches. You cannot allow yourself to scratch any itch. And the problem is, and if you think about this, wouldn't you agree, Jimmy, that most of what drives us is not, it's easy to guard yourself from the sex and money thing. That's so obvious, right? I mean, if you're married, you just guard your marriage. If you money is not like we all have unlimited access to money anyway. And, you don't have to do a robbery, you're not to do a burglary, you have to steal things. Okay, I get all that. But it seems to me that the hardest one is the power side, because it involves so many nuanced, smaller aspects of power, just pride in general. Would you agree?
I could kind of see that. You could see somebody struggling with that who from the outside looking in might not even seem powerful, a place of influence. Someone who's may even be living in poverty, has very little to their name, but in their own mind can find some sense of influence just within their friend group, within their family, on their street, whatever it is. And I definitely think that that's the one that might be easiest to hide as well. Even with somebody in Ravi Zacharias' position, yes, he is leading this ministry and he's well known, but it's easy to act humble, even if internally you're really struggling with that pride. That pride is actually driving a lot of what you're doing, even though you might be able to hide it from maybe the people around you.
Yeah, this is one of the things about Ravi's story that I typically will tell people who ask me, and very few have asked. And I didn't jump on this early and try to take advantage of the news cycle and talk about Ravi. But I was speaking about it privately to many of our associates and to my friends privately, and to people, in our family, about what, so I'll share it for the first time, I think, here on our podcast, that look, in the end, Ravi first succumbed, early on, years ago, he was accused by an atheist of inflating his credentials, of passing off his honorary doctorates as real doctorates, as earned doctorates, and posting that on his website and being introduced this way. Eventually, the RZIM pulled that stuff down from the website because it was being brought up as this is where and it was seen as a character flaw initially. But think about it, it's the power side, it's the influence side. I'm somebody, I matter, I have a doctorate, I matter. Also inflating his credentials as a teacher at certain institutions when in fact he wasn't a teacher, or having taken classes under so-and-so when in fact he didn't take classes under so-and-so. All these things are in that pride category, that power, influence, respectability, celebrity. All of these are subsets of the power category. And I think power is like 70% of all of us who do things we shouldn't do are driven not by sex or money, but by the pride, power. It's all 1 John 2. So you can find it in Scripture, but I just discovered it working cases. Now, here's why I say this about Ravi. It seems to me that Ravi it was important to him that he be Ravi Zacharias, right? And that's a big deal. This is why, for example, I do not have J. Warner Wallace Ministries, or I don't have jwarnerwallace.com. Even though I own that URL, I don't use it because I just didn't want it to be focused on us. Do you remember when I reached out to you after Ravi fell, and the first thing we did on YouTube, I asked you if it was okay to do it. Do you remember what we did?
Oh man.
Do you remember about our thumbnails?
It's the first thing we did on YouTube?
Well,
I'm not sure.
On thumbnails. What did we do with our thumbnails?
Oh, yes. We took our faces out of the thumbnails. Yeah.
And that's hard, right? And I can tell you that has really hurt our algorithm there. It has hurt the number of people who... But I kind of... And I get it. But I felt like we were... And, I used to have your face with the white outline around it, bright colors, I'd even take a screen capture of where you're in the middle of a sentence and had a kind of a goofy expression because I knew that those kinds of expressions are
That's the only expression I got, okay?
You're
not going to find a serious one in there, so...
Yeah, but so I think the point was I just wanted to get our faces off of it. Now, the old ones still have our thumbnails on them, but the ones in the last 6 months, I've taken them off because I was concerned about this. So before we get to the end of this, I just want to say here's what I saw happening. It's that Ravi first struggled with celebrity. And at some point, he had access to money that he could spend in a certain way, and he had access to women. And we could say, looking back at it, well, look, maybe somebody should have guarded his ability to have unlimited access to women. It was not accountable to. Nobody was with him. He was on his own. He wasn't being watched. Or maybe somebody should have limited the amount of money he had unlimited access to, that without having to pass it through a board of directors or whatever. So you could argue that he needed better guardrails around the two aspects of two evil motives, sex and money. But you know what? I don't think anybody was trying to put any guardrails around his celebrity, because don't we see celebrity in a different way? We don't see it as the sin, a subset of the sin of power or the pursuit of power. We see it as a positive. Even in culture, don't you feel that way? Even in just amongst people who have social media platforms.
I feel like it's one of the most difficult teachings in the Bible to accept. I mean, it's easy to say we believe it, but I think it's hard to live practically, is this idea that the depravity of humanity, that we're all such terrible sinners. Because we want to think the best in people, especially people we care about, our friends. But I can tell you, for me, I would hope that if I was beginning to struggle with something, that there would be some close person in my life who I had a relationship with who would care enough to notice and say something to me about it. And I can't speak to what kind of relationships Ravi did or didn't have in his personal life. I have no idea. But I would hope that in the Christian community, we're doing our best to hold each other accountable, and we're kind of looking out for each other almost proactively. That if it seemed like even me and my wife just weren't getting along perfect at church, that somebody might pull me aside and be like, "Hey, is everything okay? Did I just read into that, or was that something more?" Because I think if we were all there for each other, then hopefully somebody might catch it along the way. I'm not sure.
Well, here's the other problem, though. In the end, nobody wants to put up guardrails on celebrity. In fact, every one of us, even anyone listening to this, watching this, you think, "Oh, I'm not a public Christian. I'm not an evangelist. I'm not an apologist." Really? You've got Instagram. and your Instagram account or TikTok or whatever it is. It's all about you. It's you promoting you to. It's all social marketing, not social media. If you want to be social, just text somebody. You don't have to. No, I'm posting. I don't even think people in your generation. I'm going to say this as the old man now. Okay, here's the old man. I have a hard. People don't even know how to say Happy Valentine's Day to each other without saying it publicly with a long description of why their life is so great, why their relationship is so great. There is no virtue of privacy anymore. We've all surrendered our privacy, and we all want more clicks, not less, more subscribers, not less. As a matter of fact, I've offered this. If nobody knew on YouTube how many subscribers you had, and nobody knew how many views you were getting or how many likes, none of that stuff was allowed. They don't even post it. You have no idea if anyone's watching, if anyone's subscribing. How long do you think a lot of these people would be doing this? Instead, what they're doing is they're watching their subscribers go up. They're watching their views go up. They're watching their likes and comments go up. And this empowers us to believe we're something other than we. That is the pursuit of power. As a matter of fact, if Ravi is not a famous, internationally known person who has access to money, does the sex part even happen? It's when you have two of those things, and you saw this when you were in we're going to run out of time here, but you saw this when you were traveling in Italy, didn't you?
I definitely saw that there were some different cultural practices there than that I was used to seeing here in Long Beach in California. That I would see super wealthy elderly men with very young women that walking hand in hand, where I just didn't see that here. I remember telling you that when I came back.
Yeah, so think about that for us. You think about that for a second. That means then that if I've got the power and the money, I can get the sex. I mean, let's just be honest. This is what people do. They leverage two of these motives to get the third. So the takeaway for me on the Ravi thing is, hey, folks, it's easy to guard ourselves on the sex and money. We can at least say that, right? But we are completely surrendered in the pursuit of power because our social media is driving us to be as famous as we can be, even if it's just with our friends and family members. We want to be known. We want people to see our lives. I had this for dinner. I had this vacation last week. It's all about the pursuit of power in terms of acknowledging celebrity. And we create celebrity even with our friends and family. So there's the takeaway for me. I know we're really up against a hard break now, but the takeaway for me on Ravi is guard yourselves, not just in the sex and money. Guard yourselves on the celebrity and power side, and you won't have to deal with the other two, because if you scratch one, you will scratch the other two.
Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of the Cold Case Christianity Broadcast. We'll see you next week.
To hear more from J. Warner Wallace, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For more information on this week's topic, visit youtube.com/coldcasechristianity with J. Warner Wallace. Thank you for joining us on this Cold Case Christianity broadcast.